All right, so welcome back to Happy Hour with Heather and Guest. As you can see, Heather unfortunately is a little under the weather, so she won't be joining us tonight. So it'll be me and Keefe from Ghost Cult Magazine. Thank you so much for stepping in. And
Well, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Get well soon to Heather. We've been circling each other on the interwebs for a few years. I'm a big fan of yours. I'm a fan of your writing, and I'm a fan of this show, and I'm a fan of Heather. And we met surreptitiously. He'd throw around $10 words at the end of a week for me, and we circled each other. I used to teach a lot of music marketing. I still do some of it. I'm looking to get back into it in 23. And it's just I'm so proud of you guys and thrilled for what you built here. So thank you for what you have brought to the community.
oh, it's yeah. For those of you who don't know, Keefe was instrumental in being part of this marketing course that both Heather and I took. And one of the projects was to create a Facebook group. So she created Happy Hour with Heather and Guest. And then as the pandemic continued, it sort of evolved into a place for musicians to perform. She asked me to come on and help. And then there you go. And now here we are, a couple
Here
of
we
years
are.
later.
Interestingly enough, the two of you were two of the best students of the courses,
Oh, well,
multiple
thank you.
courses, and also the two non-professional musicians.
Yeah,
So
it's well,
everybody else, we were gearing it toward, as myself and Kurt Stewart and some other people, and we were gearing it towards bands and artists trying to, break through because there's so much noise and it's so hard to make it. And you were interested parties who were just interested in helping your own brands out or just learning more about what we
yeah.
do. Yeah.
I had because I at the time I had only published one book through an independent press, and I was really unfamiliar with how I should market myself, and I somehow got involved in the world that you run in. So that was how, and I know Heather at the time was mostly focused on her online store. But since we're both big fans of music, it made sense, and it was a lot of fun, and it ended up being really helpful and very fruitful. So here we are, and now the show's evolved into basically me and Heather just discussing different contemporary bands. Maybe I should wait for there we go. So
There's a siren going on as you hear outside, so I'm
yeah,
muting
it's all
myself. I'm
good.
good.
It's the nature of the beast. By the way, Heather informed me I think it's Ghost Cult Magazine's 10th anniversary coming up.
It is indeed, it's happened. It is indeed the 10th anniversary of ghostcultmag.com founding. I was not an original founding member. I came on very early. I ended up taking over it in year one, and I have been running it ever since. And thank you very much. I'm both bemused and surprised that we made it, but it's been hard fought. I often say in my many band interviews that Ghost Cult Mag running a music website, music news, reviews, interviews. That's what we do between here and YouTube and also the interwebs and socials. It's like having a band. It's like being a DIY band. It's not much different. So if you're not one of the top 10 music websites in the world that has corporate backing and a huge paid staff, you're hustling and grinding like everybody else. So I feel very lucky to be out here. This was not done alone. We had a digital magazine for half the time we've been in existence, more than half the time. We used to try to run a monthly or semi-monthly magazine and a daily website at the same time, plus social media is a huge Herculean task. And I'm very lucky. I got a couple of senior people who've been with me a long time that really help run the thing with me, as well as a humongous staff all over the world still. From even back when we have some people still with us for 10 years. We still have a sizable footprint of writers in Europe, mostly England, but also other places, the UK, if you will. And I just feel very lucky to be here and do what I do. And we just had, we're on like a huge run of interviews. I just interviewed Devin Townsend for his new album that's out. I just interviewed Chris Broderick from In Flames, small artists, bigger artists, the whole gamut.
Yeah, if you're looking for amateurs who invent words like proggy doomy, then this is the show for you. If you actually want legitimate insight and bands that run the spectrum from being just starting to established, then definitely check out everything Ghost Cult Mag touches. It's definitely worth your while. I can say that both as a fan and as someone who gets news and information. Um, and today you've been kind enough to join us as a special guest to talk about three groups. We were going to kick things off with a group called Weedpecker, who I believe are from Warsaw, Poland. Typically, Heather puts together a playlist on YouTube, so that people can listen to it on their own time and then hopefully hear us talk about it. So we're not going to listen to any music on the show. We're just going to discuss. Hopefully, you've heard most of the tracks already, and we can. So, kicking things off with Weedpecker, who's from Warsaw, and they came around from a desire. At one point, Heather and I were talking about we should start discussing any band that has to do with marijuana, any band whose name, any any amalgam of weed, devil's lettuce, what have you. And I think I picked Weedpecker because I thought it was just a really cool name. And yeah, so their first album is just called Weedpecker, and the tracks that we were going to talk about were, I think it's pronounced Berenjena Pipe or Berenjena Pipe. I'm not 100% sure. I did look it up. I know it's an eggplant. And then Mind Breath and Sativa Landscapes. So any thoughts about any of those three?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, let me preface this by saying unintentionally I am wearing a shirt by a weed-themed band, Connoisseur,
There
from
you
the
go.
Bay Area on Tank Crimes Records. Just got this shirt. This is from the Art of Skinner. He designed this shirt for them. And just coincidentally picked up the first black shirt that was clean, and this was it. It's very soft. Also, it's very good when I'm going to sit in the chair all day and do interviews and do work. First and foremost, I'll also say I'm mostly an albums guy. So Weedpecker is the band I'm familiar with. They've been covered in Ghost Cult before. Full disclaimer, not by myself, and have been sort of tangentially aware of them as a good band, a good psychedelic doom band, right? And I'm really an albums guy. I'm a person that if I like a band, I want to listen to the whole album, and I don't make note of tracks as much. I'm usually not the person to know the tracks, and I do a lot of track by track interviews where I read off the tracks and let the artist talk about them. But Weedpecker's a really good band. They were, have made it into our top 75 list for their last album, actually, for I think 2019 for 4. And so I was a bit aware of them. These are phenomenal tracks. This is a really killer band. If you like Elephant Tree, if you like Elder, especially their last couple of records, some of them sort of middle era Mastodon, this is for you. Fantastic showmanship, great playing. I can imagine these guys are made terrific live, just like with a cool light show, I hope. And yeah, just a killer. These are just killer tracks, especially the length. It seems like when they go long, they stretch out. Really, they stretch out the prog thing, proggy doomy, like you just said. Yeah, perfect
Yeah,
adjective. I'm not gonna lie. That's really great,
thank you.
and they
Yeah,
are.
well, I'm not. I feel like there's some bands out there that are the sonic equivalent of taking a trip or smoking out of an eggplant pipe, and I feel like these guys do a really great job of structuring the music to give you that impression. As not that I'm someone who dabbles in hallucinogens, but I feel like listening to this music, you're going to get that proggy doomy psychedelic, really kind of melodic feel to it. So it's really well done. I hadn't heard them before. I kind of picked the band based on the name, and then when I listened to the music, I was like, yeah, these guys are definitely going to go on my playlist. So yeah, so the self-titled album was just Weedpecker, and then next up we've got 3 and then 4 Stream of Forgotten Thoughts. So if you're an albums guy, if you want to talk about the albums, where I'm more than cool to do that.
Yeah, no worries. Again, these tracks you picked out are terrific. I will say that 4 starts off, I think, because 3 is, like I said, a little more expansive. They went a little more heavy on the 4 album, and I
Yeah.
think it's a little more aggressive. Starts out with a terrific opening track with a great chugging riff. I have my Bandcamps open on the other screens, and and of course, anybody we discussed today, I'm going to follow, support by tomorrow. Tomorrow, as we record this, I don't know when this is going to air, but tomorrow is the next Bandcamp Friday, so it could be a good time to go purchase any of these artists. But anytime's a good time. Bandcamp is the least offensive of all the money collecting platforms, unless you're a band where you can create your own platform or just have such a good following that you don't need a platform. I feel like everybody kind of needs a digital streaming and selling platform. But yeah, I love the 4 albums heavier. So it's just kind of, it's not better or worse. I think they're about equal in terms of quality albums. And I think 3 is a little more progressive and spacey. And 4 is a little more straight ahead. Some of the songs are a little more aggressive, a little more heavy riffing, a little more cave in and less chemists. You know what I'm saying? On that end of the spectrum. But when they chill, when they really dial it back and they peel back, they do really wonderful. I say really, Pink Floyd is my favorite band ever. Despite my reputation as a huge metal guy, which I am, Pink Floyd's my favorite band. And to me, the best Pink Floyd is when you hear a song over and over and over so many times, and you're still discovering new parts of it. And this band has some of that. So that's high
It's
praise for me. That's about as high as it gets if I compare someone to Pink Floyd. I don't do it often, but
it's
this is one of those.
well, it's so funny you mention that because in my notes, especially for the song "Fire Far Away" off of 4, I say that it's sort of I because I'm a big adverb guy. I say it's sort of Pink Floydy. Um, and then the last minute or so has this incendiary guitar. But I definitely agree with you. It sounded like they captured a lot of what made Pink Floyd really great when they would go and do those 25-minute long songs like Echoes. Um, and you're absolutely right. I think 3 has a little bit more of the hypnotic kind of psychedelic proggy aspect to it. 4 is a little more hard. Um, so yeah, I mean, I picked the tracks were Fire Far Away, Endless Extensions of Good Vibrations. I just like the name of that track, and Symbiotic Nova. But there's something for everyone on all these albums.
All
Um,
these tracks are brilliantly named, by the way. As you're a writer and I have a writing background, you can always appreciate a clever name.
oh
Like a
yeah,
song, a really clever song title is just like the cherry on top of a music sundae.
absolutely. Yeah, no, these were. I would recommend getting all of these albums, Weedpecker 3 and 4, and I know they have others. They're a really prolific band, so I'm hoping to go back and check out their catalog. These were the 3 that I figured I'd pick just to have something to discuss. Um, but yeah, the only other thing, so on 3, there was a song called Embrace, which reminded me of Led Zeppelin's Achilles' Last Stand.
Yes.
Um, I want, anytime I recognize something that's like, oh, that's a specific influence, whether or not it was done on purpose, but I was like, oh, this reminds me of that. I usually have to bring it up. So
No worries. That's it. Yeah, for the guitar nerds out there, there's like a really cool suspended chord that sounds like the opening non-heavy. Actually, Zeppelin, most of the riffs are not distorted at all. It's just Jimmy playing through an amp, overdriven amp. Not even like the heaviness doesn't even come from the guitars in most Pink Floyd. It's the drums and the bass. But in Achilles' Last Stand has a beautiful opening and closing ellipsis, right? That part, right? That picked part, and it's very, I say that same kind of chordy wonderfulness. Yeah, this band is great. They're pulling on their influences. They're not completely rote copies. There's definitely some originality. I am now a rejuvenated fan. Like I said, we've covered them just as a website. We've covered them, but now I'm like, oh man, I would love for them to put something else out. It's a tough time in the world in that part of the world right now, so hopefully they're okay and making music and surviving. But the motherland. I'm part Polish American, so descendant. The motherland is doing well when it comes to the stoner rock and psychedelic doom.
yeah, well, I hope that you will heed our advice. If you're out there watching, go check out the playlist Heather's put together. Pick up some Weedpecker, as Keefe mentioned. Tomorrow is Bandcamp Friday. There's no better time. Weedpecker has a prolific output of music. And yeah, no, it was a great discovery. Like it was an accidental discovery, but it ended up yielding some really great results. So, um,
Good
and
job.
then next up we had Asteroid, from which I believe they're from Orebro, Sweden.
I
Um,
did not know this band going in, but I was also pleasantly surprised. It's good to get surprised. I hear so much music. I am pitched so much stuff from big labels, little labels. You will get underground stuff that just like knocks your socks off. And this band really surprised. I had no, you would think like, oh, I should know. It seems like there should have been 20 bands named this by
right.
now, if there probably are. And I just, just for one pass by me. No puns intended about asteroids and misses. But yeah, man, this is a fun one. This is a real fun one. I think if you like this genre, this is a surprise, like a really pleasant surprise.
Yeah, well, I can only imagine. Like I stumble upon bands because I have the time to just do like a YouTube spelunking mission where I go down a rabbit hole. But like, I can't imagine if you're also getting pitched music from bands, if you have labels you're talking, if you're doing all, it's really difficult, I would imagine, to find everyone. There's always going to be bands that sort of fall through the cracks. So I'm glad that this was one I could bring. I wasn't familiar with Asteroid either. I think I found them on YouTube, or it may have been like a this you might like this recommendation type thing. Um, and yeah, I mean, great stoner rock. They're sort of, they sounded like that Swedish stoner rock sound, the blues kind of psychedelic. Um, I did want to point out the track 13th Witching Hour, which had sort of like a Doors Unknown Soldier type drumming that I thought was unique. I hadn't really heard that used before. Um, so for me personally, that was another thing, like recognizing the Achilles' Last Stand. I was like, oh, this sounds somewhat familiar. But yeah, I would say go check out Asteroid. They're another band that has more than one album. This was the self-titled one that we listened to, but they've got a few up there. And and then yeah, last was actually, so on Bandcamp, I wanted to credit someone named Misfit 1969 who said retro sounding, groovy, and fuzzy music, which I just thought was a perfect encapsulation. So if you're into retro sounding, groovy, and fuzzy music, pick up some Asteroid.
Nice. Sweden is like Norway. I don't know why they're so good at music in Sweden and art and other things, writing and they're so good at the arts, and their Sweden obviously is just phenomenally known for all kinds of metal and rock, but why are they so good at doom and psychedelic stoner rock stuff? Like they're so good at it.
I don't
So good.
know. I'm glad they are, and I'm glad there are enough bands putting out great music. And I think we can add Asteroid to that list. Um, but yeah, there's something about the sort of the Scandinavian countries that all seem to do different genres of metal really well. Um, so who knows? But I will keep enjoying it. And then we have the final band is Snail, who I think I picked just because, as a fan of Doom, I looked at that as a symbol, like, oh, the snail, that's a slow moving thing. I like slow music. That's probably meant to be. Um, and then Fractal Altar was the name of the album. Again,
Mm.
I hadn't heard of them. This was a completely random episode where I just happened to cobble together these bands by chance. And I know Snail, the other bands are from Europe. Snail is from Seattle, Washington. So we've returned back to the States.
Back to the U.S. Snail, great name. First of all, just perfect name for that. I would say they grab me the least of the three, but that's not a dig on them. They're good. And I think what I'm hearing from them, like a regional kind of, nodding, plotting kind of style, right? Like they're not, Asteroid was much more, a little more jumped up and obviously, just by comparison, maybe an unfair comparison, but yeah, they're definitely like they're good at what they do. They're in their little zone. I dig them. I don't know that I would return to this album a bunch of times, but it's pretty good.
I Before I listened to the music, I saw that the first track off the album is called "We're on a Mission from God," which I recognized from the Blues Brothers. And
I
again,
like that too. Yeah.
I was like, oh well, this has to be something that's worthwhile if I recognize, that in joke. Um, and yeah, more Bandcamp reviews were fuzzy guitars, dreamy melodies, backmasking, and psychedelic effects dominate this record. Highly recommended as part of a healthy magic mushroom excursion.
To throw them a little credit, I would say that one thing I think Snail draws from bands like Nebula and Yawning Man, so the influences are in the right places, right? Or Earthless. They're pulling from the right part of the genre, right? If you're gonna, as Paul Stanley once said of Kiss, if you're gonna steal a diamond. I'm not saying these guys are stealers, but I think in general everybody can acknowledge the stoner doom genre is, very, we're just, repopulating a lot of the same ideas that are 50 years old from Black Sabbath, right? But they're good. I just think like, yeah, that record, it's a good record for whatever reason. I just had it a little lower in my, for enjoyment in terms of the other two.
Gotcha. Well, uh, it'll probably all of these albums will be on the playlist that Heather's put together. So feel free to check them out. As Keefe mentioned, tomorrow is Bandcamp Friday, so there's not a better time to pick up music and merch. Um, and yeah, I loved all three of these bands. They will find their way into my playlist at some point. And I look forward to doing a deep dive on all their back catalogs because I know each band has more albums than we discussed today. And yeah, and so what else are you up to these days that you want anything people should know about?
Yeah, I mean, the usual. I could say the same for you. Congratulations! I just realized this is episode number 50 for you guys, so
Oh
that's
yeah,
that's amazing.
thank
Uh,
you, thank you. Yeah.
I had just reached. In addition to Ghost Cult, I'm also the co-host of the Glacially Musical podcast or Podcast, as in beers, with Nick Cameron. People may know him from our collective interwebs and Twitter feeds, and we are actually recording our next episode after this. But in terms of Ghost Cult, we live on our website at ghostcultmag.com. Tremendous amount of content going up all the time daily on YouTube at Ghost Cult Mag, at Ghost Cult Mag on most all the socials. Instagram and YouTube are really where the magic happens. The website's a good source for music news every day. I like to say that we're like the not shitty insert worst music website you hate. We try not to be. Like I said, we're smaller, but we're mighty. I think statistically, we're still in the top 25 of all the heavy music websites. Certainly the top 20 in terms of just heavy music. But I'm just proud of what we've done, and we're our 500th album review for the year. Just to give you a sense of scope, was this week when we reviewed the new Devin Townsend. That wasn't that's an accident, but I think we're going to do at least another 50 to 100 before it's all over. Maybe. We're about to do our end of year polls. We're not a website that does a lot of listicles, although surely I should do some more on YouTube because they seem to get a lot of traffic. But we also have a podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Some of our interviews double on the podcast, and some of them are just exclusive to the podcast. This week, one of our crews in the UK is covering the Damnation Festival, headlined by Converge and Pig Destroyer and At the Gates and Godflesh, playing exclusive sets and a bunch of other crushing heavy bands. So those reviews will show up on Ghost Cult, but also I interviewed the festival co-founder and booker to discuss how he books that festival. So it's really interesting stuff. Like I'm proud to say that we don't get maybe I've never interviewed Metallica, but I have interviewed Ozzy and Megadeth and Devin Townsend a few times and a bunch of other artists, Doro. I have my favorites. You're not supposed to have favorites, but you clearly end up having your favorite people ever. I've done thousands of interviews. I worked at other music websites before I ended up owning Ghost Cult. So, yeah, the interview is really my personal passion. I think if I could take some time away from the site, I would love to write a book someday about music, especially metal. But we'll see if I allow myself that to happen. And anybody who checks us out, I'm grateful for every single person that ever interacts with us. Leave us comments, leave us feedback. We're here for it. As for you, what are you up to? You have so much stuff going on. I
Yeah,
love
well,
following your exploits.
I'm right now I'm in school to get a clinical mental health counseling degree, so that's taking up the majority of my time, and yeah, just focused on doing that. Not writing as much right now, but also doing this with Heather is a way to kind of decompress and have fun. So that's what's on my plate. But
Here's an interesting thing that made me think of you. So I just watched the. I don't know if you're a fan of King Crimson at all.
oh
They
yeah,
just
yeah,
put out they just put out a documentary about the history of the band and the current band, and it seems like a very difficult band to be in. Robert Fripp is very eccentric and demanding and exacting. He, like he had a very like love hate relationship. The director's like one of the few people he likes that he allowed to come in and kind of see under the hood a little, but and recorded like during a very difficult time in the band. Their drummer passed away during the pandemic from cancer, and it's all in the movie, right? That's all in the film. And I have an interview coming up with the director. I love this film, and I love King Crimson. I always have. But yeah, Robert said something at one point like, "Oh, why don't you just take a day off?" Like, could you just say, "Oh, the show's not happening today. Well, I'm going to go back to the hotel room and rehearse for 10 hours." And it's like, why? He's like, because if I feel like I go one day without playing, it's like a marathon runner. I'm going to get worse by one day. And he's 76 years old, and he's one of the greatest, since he's 20 years old, he's one of the greatest guitar players ever to live. And he still works at his craft day in, day out. And I think in a lot of ways, like for guys like us as a writer, obviously some of my stuff is like not artistic or creative. It's just like report the news. I have a journalism background also. I was a published poet when I was a young adult. So I had writing dreams bigger than being a journalist, but I also love journalism because I played in bands for a long time, just personally. So I love them. I love music and music makers, right? We are the dreamers and the makers of music, right? But I think about like you, do you feel like, just if you can't, pursue writing, like I'm sure there was a period of time where you did nothing else, or mostly all your energy went there outside of living and sustaining.
yeah. I mean
How
that.
does that track for you? That idea, like I have to work on this craft all the time. Maybe not daily because you're in school, and I've been in school. It's hard,
Yeah, well,
but
it's I've also there had been a point where the production of something was the most important thing. Like I need to be published, I need to get this out. And then I shifted my focus to where I was just like, you know what? Let's just focus on creating time to write. And then if you do that, you can never lose because you're not the expectations are always going to be met as long as you can balance things. So that's sort of where I am now. And I've been fortunate that I've been able to kind of shift the focus. Like there are like weekends I can still find some time to write, and it's fun and it's decompressing. But I've also sort of have achieved enough to be like, okay, well, we can take our foot off the gas for a little bit. But
it's good to
yeah,
know. I like to talk shop, so thanks
oh
for
yeah, no,
humoring
no,
me. And
absolutely.
again, a fan of your work and a fan of
Well,
your
thank you,
writing, and
thank
look
you.
forward to more in the future when
Yeah,
the time
yeah, I
allows.
I will have more stuff coming out. And by the way, if you're out there and you're a fan of anything music related, check out Ghost Cult Mag. Check out the podcast. Check out Glacially Musical. Um, so there's enough information to keep you busy for a long time with a lot of great insight. Kiwi, thank you so much for taking the time. We'll be in touch, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me once again. It's a pleasure to see you here.